Hey there, interwebs, and welcome back to How Fascinating, where this episode is for all you armchair theologians out there. How many horsemen of the apocalypse are there? It's 4, right? Wrong. Let's take a look at the book of Revelation, count how many, and more importantly, see who they are. The two most famous, or should I say infamous, eschatological equestrians are war and death, and the two go together like pizza and pineapple or Lennon and McCartney. There's also Famine and Conquest, and hold up, what was that last one? To quote the world's best-selling work of historical fiction, "And I saw, and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering, and to conquer." That's right, Conquest is actually stated to be the very first horseman of the apocalypse, as an archer on a white horse, but because the Bible doesn't directly give his name, there are numerous interpretations of what he's supposed to represent, Conquest just being the most well-accepted. Other interpretations include Christ, the Antichrist, the Roman Empire, and war, even though war is already a different horseman. The discrepancy is addressed by the explanation that the first horseman represents righteous war, hence the horse's white coloration of purity, and the second horseman represents civil war, which is why his horse is red. The earliest known reference to the first horseman representing pestilence comes from the 1906 Jewish Encyclopedia. I don't know about you, but I was expecting to learn that pestilence was a late medieval creation, what with all the Bible study and plagues like the Black Death going around at the time, but no, pestilence doesn't mount the steed until the 20th century. Dang! In Vicente Blasco Ibáñez's novel, The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, published a decade later in 1916, he wrote, quote, "The horseman on the white horse was clad in a showy and barbarous attire. At his back swung the brass quiver filled with poisoned arrows containing the germs of all diseases." Unquote. If you're a fan of good omens, you may know that the fourth horseman in that work is pollution. According to Agnes Nutter's nice and accurate prophecy, number 5911, there shall come a pollution and pestilence upon the land. In-universe, pollution took over the job of horseman number 4 from pestilence after he retired in 1936, muttering something about penicillin. If he took the job from Conquest in 1906, that would give him the shortest tenure of the lot, a mere 30 years. Terry Pratchett also gave us another horseman of the apocalypse in Thief of Time, named Chaos, aka Ronnie Soak. He left the group due to artistic disagreements before they became famous, though, and began work as a milkman instead. Really, he's the best of the bunch, the Pete best, that is, and this brings the grand total of all horsemen up to 7, but there are only ever 4 at a time. The most popular lineup these days is War, Death, Famine, and Pestilence, and I suppose that if Chaos or Conquest is the Pete best of this foursome, that'd make Pestilence Ringo. Bummer. As an aside, I had way too much fun figuring out who's who for this picture. Ringo has to be Pestilence because Pete is Conquest. Paul is Death, both because of that stupid conspiracy and the fact that, excluding Ringo, he's the only one still alive. What's that old joke about dying in order by talent? Since we seem to be going with irony value now, John has to be War, and that just leaves Famine for George. Speaking of the Beatles, when people ask me John or Paul, I go John every time, but given my choice of the big 4, I'd pick George. If people just ask me who my favorite Beatle is, I always say, the best one. A lot of people think I'm joking by saying obviously the best one is my favorite, but not specifying whom I consider to be the best, but every so often I'll see someone remember, hey, wasn't there a drummer named Pete Best? That all being said, I'll still take the Stones on any of the 8 days of the week. Since I've now started giving my controversial opinions, here's a hot take. Odin, Viking god of war and wisdom, is war astride Sleipnir, and we know from Norse mythology that he plans to show up ready to rock come Ragnarok. Additionally, Chiron was the centaur who trained Heracles, Achilles, and Odysseus, among others, but he was also a master of medicine and pharmacology, so he could be the horseman of pestilence. He is literally a horseman. Additionally, he's often portrayed as a Sagittary or centaur archer, and according to Revelation, Conquest, whom pestilence replaced, was armed with a bow. This sort of makes Chiron both of them in one, a fusion of horse, rider, conquest, and pestilence. Also, his name means hand, and I bring that fact up for no other reason than it's mildly fascinating. The other idea I had for the role was Xipe-Totec, our Lord the Flayed One, Aztec deity of many things, including Plague God. Now, who'd be Death in this extended crackfic I guess I'm assembling? My first thought was everyone's bro Hades, since Hades is explicitly stated to follow Death in Revelation 6:8, though depending on which translation you use, it can be hard to tell if it's supposed to be the guy or the place. But although Hades is a chthonic entity, he's not really Death per se. That'd be Thanatos. My next thought was Our Lady of Sacred Death, Nuestra Señora de la Santa Muerte, or just Santa Muerte for short. For those who don't know, she came about when some Spanish conquistadors got their Catholicism all over Mictecacihuatl, the Aztec queen of the underworld. She's since become sort of an idol or folk saint in modern-day Mexico and Mexican-American Catholicism, but the Vatican has denounced her as a false idol. And I'd just like to say that the condemnation of a humble psychopomp is a bold move coming from an organization which practices cephalophoric idolatry, ritual cannibalism, and believes one's soul can only be saved through human sacrifice. Despite the condemnation, her popularity has only grown in recent years, and she has an estimated 10 to 20 million followers today. The most infamous of these are cartels and other criminals, but she's also seen as a divine protector of Mexico's LGBT community, since she's sort of an unofficial patron saint of society's outcasts. The Iglesia Católica Tradicional Mexicana Estados Unidos, also known as the Church of Santa Muerte, even performs same-sex marriages. She's an incredibly fascinating figure, but she's not my deadly horseman, so I've linked some further reading on her in the description below. If she's not the Black Rider, who is? That'd be the Dullahan. When one of these Irish fae calls someone's name, that person dies. They ride black horses rather than pale ones, and while often male can be female as well. They have big round eyes and a hideous ear-to-ear grin, almost like skulls do. Decapitated, one must carry its severed head under an arm, and as someone with a personal love of the Sleepy Hollow legend, this tickles me pink. This might also be why I'm such a fan of Gawain and the Green Knight. Their horses pull funerary object-adorned wagons, whose spokes are femurs, the headlights are skulls with candles in them, and the cover is made of flayed human skin, but the most metal thing about them is that they wield whips made from corpses' spines. They use these to lash out the eyes of anyone who dares to watch them, and that's the merciful treatment. They may also throw a basin of blood on you, which means you'll be their next victim. That's war, death, and disease taken care of, so all that leaves us with now is famine. Both the Japanese yokai known as gaki and the Algonquin Wendigo are supernatural creatures who are constantly ravenously hungry and unable to be sated, but neither have anything to do with horses. Limos is the Greek goddess of starvation, but she has nothing to do with horses either. Of the three, I think the Wendigo is the best choice to take up the mantle of famine, because the horseman is accompanied by a voice crying out, quote, "A day's wages for a quart of wheat or 3 quarts of barley, but don't touch the oil or the wine," unquote. One of the many interpretations of this line is that the luxuries for the wealthy, like oil and wine, are in cheap abundance, while staples like bread for the layperson are scarce. This imbalance may have been caused by economic pressure on farmers to produce more profitable luxury goods to the detriment of grain production, causing the workers to languish and starve while the elite carry on ineffective. How's that quote from Rousseau go again? When the poor have nothing left to eat, they will eat the rich. Now there's some conspicuous consumption I can get behind. The Wendigo is associated not only with starvation specifically, but also avarice and harmfully excessive consumption in general, including cannibalism and insatiable greed. My other crackfic is that instead of Sleipnir, Chiron, and the rest, the horses themselves are the mares of Diomedes who breathe fire and eat human flesh. Canonically, or at least as canonical as you can get with Greek mythology, there were 4 of them: Podargos the Swift, Xanthos the Yellow, Dinos the Terrible, and Lampon the Shining. Also Lamp Off, the Not Shining. Presumably, Conquest rides the shining white horse Lampon, Ol Hippomachus is on the swift Podargos, Famine's on the black and terrible Dinos, and Death's on the pale yellow Xanthos. If there's any lesson we can learn from all these cataclysmic characters, it's that all things must come to an end, and that includes this video. Thanks for watching, and have a nice doomsday.